Sometimes, no matter how many ways you fix your mouth to say you did everything you knew how to do and you did it as fast as you knew how to do it, it still is sometimes difficult to reconcile the feeling that you didn't. Geez, if we'd left 5 minutes sooner, if we'd left 5 minutes later, what if, the what if, that's hard sometimes to be at peace with, if that makes sense.
For me, I thought of those who I knew were dead, and I felt so guilty, survivor's guilt, because there's no rhyme and reason for why I came home and they didn't. I deployed out of my hometown. I came back to my hometown. I go to my hometown VA, so they take good care of me. And yet I've been in a mental health hospital 3 times in 15 years.
In your imagination, you're just going to get out of the military and you're going to put up the white picket fence and live happily ever after. Unfortunately, things creep out of your past that sometimes make that difficult. We were coming out of Kuwait up to Iraq, and Iraqi Republican guards that were in basic SUVs hopped out, shot at us with AK-47s, and ran off. At that point, we were given the order to take the vehicle out.
Rapid rate of fire, engage.
It wasn't until we got next to the vehicle that we realized what had happened. And it was a mother and a father and 2 kids. And to me, that was probably the one thing I'm still to this day trying to shake. I just couldn't wrap my mind around what I had done. I'm a good man. I would never hurt anybody intentionally. And so walking away from that incident and watching that whole thing unfold absolutely changed me, especially when I became a parent myself.
This is me when I was a baby. And this is my daddy. And he can fight anyone that is bad.
During my 12 months in Vietnam, I saw some pretty intense combat, and the prospect of death was never far from my mind. It's like that for a lot of veterans who find themselves in the action, no matter what war or branch they were in. All of us have to carry the burden of what we witnessed and reconcile ourselves with what we did or didn't do.
When you train for so long and you expect to do certain things, when those things happen, it's a rush. It is a feeling that I miss. It's a feeling that I try to experience again, and I often find myself in very dangerous situations just to match that feeling. Getting blacked out drunk, having unprotected sex, doing drugs. I'm scared that I'm killing myself. I'm scared that I'm dying because all I want to do is just crazy.
When I came home, I felt like I was going crazy internally. I was really distant, and my kids sensed it. But then at the same time, I was really mean. I didn't want to show my frustrations or weakness in front of my mother and my children. So I moved up to the attic. There I could cry alone. I could get mad alone. I could drink alone, and they wouldn't see where I wasn't the same.
I can't tell you how many instances where they'd call me up and be like, "Oh, so and so got arrested for a DWI last night." Years later, so and so's addicted to drugs. Somebody took their life. Individuals that haven't been in combat don't understand there's no quick fix.
At points you feel like the book is closed, your war is over, but then you realize the war followed you home and you just can't get away from it, you just can't escape it. I think the hardest part about being a veteran right now is the losses keep mounting. Clay Hunt and I had served together all 4 years. Clay was kind of my little brother. He was my partner in sniper school. The one thing in sniper school is you're never allowed to be farther than arm's length away from your partner, ever, at any point in time. And they drill this into you, this idea that you can only survive together. And then a couple years after we came back from our last tour, when Clay needed me most, I wasn't there, and he killed himself. And you'll have a lot of people tell you that there's nothing you could have done, it's not your fault. Yeah, I understand that those are rational thoughts, but, you know, I'm not going to lie to myself. There's more I could have done. And, you know, some portion of Clay's death is on me. I wasn't arm's length.
I actually tried taking my own life. And luckily there were a handful of friends there that picked up on what was taking place. And you know, they brought me where I needed to be. And when I woke up the next day, my dad came to me and said, "You got to be f***ing me. The enemy couldn't kill you, and now you're going to do it for him." Made me realize how lucky I was, because even though I was damaged and broken, and maybe not the same person that I was the year prior, I still had a lot more to live for.
Even now, looking back, I wouldn't change going in the military, being a soldier, for anything in the world. The only thing I would change is that day. If I could go back and unring that bell and have all of us come home, that's the one thing I would change. But I would never change my military service.
One of the greatest gifts that I gained in the military is the fact that I can always take one more step. You think you can't, you think you're done, you think you're exhausted, there's no way you can take one more step. Guess what? You can.
I one day woke up and I was going out for a combat fitness test. Every Marine, regardless of age and rank, still goes out and runs his combat fitness test.
Go! Running, running, running!
It's about physical fitness, it's about standards. There's just no exceptions to that. And I don't know how I got into the data, but basically I learned on that particular day that I was the oldest woman in the United States Marine Corps. And here I'm going out to run this combat fitness test with my Marines. So I got up there and like trying to compete, and these poor, young kids, when I'm throwing them over my back, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, I tried not to eat breakfast today." I'm like, "Hey, we got this, we're fine." But that day I went back to my office and I really came to the conclusion that it was time. It was time for me to go ahead and see the next path. And so I went ahead and submitted my retirement papers, realizing that it was time for the next generation to take the helm, because we were in a good place.
Hanging up that uniform and figuring out your place in the world can be one of the toughest parts of the veteran's journey. I missed the adrenaline of combat.
Action, Wes.
And eventually found it again in acting.
So what makes you want to work with the homeless?
I don't know.
The stakes were high, but ones I could live with.
Tonight it is my tremendous honor to be present at a long overdue moment, as Wes Studi becomes the very first Native American to receive an Academy Award.
The way home is different for everyone. There's no one right way to take that next step.
Hello.
When I returned for about 7 years, I served as a chaplain in retirement homes, assisted living, and skilled nursing. And so I started a weekly veterans group. I wanted to understand, how do you carry all of this throughout your whole lifetime? I mean, some of their stories, if we were to have a pecking order of war stories, some of theirs were infinitely worse than anything I encountered. And so for them to sort of model and say, it can be done. You can carry all of that, and you don't have to go numb. You don't have to pack it away. You don't have to shut the door on it. You don't have to pretend that it's not there in order to get along in civilian life. They were definitely a lifeline for me.
Every individual needs to deal with each issue they have as a lifetime commitment. You have to. You got to find that way to keep moving forward, to stay positive, to change yourself, to fit yourself into society. You got to engage in it.
I found comfort in art, and that was my outlet. This dark past and these crazy experiences that I've had. I mean, I feel like the only way that, I'm able to voice that is through my art.
I was used to killing things and getting rid of bad things, and the bad thing at that time that I felt was me, so I contemplated on taking myself out of the equation. But I found myself in my computer room, and I stayed in there for a few days and just typed and typed and typed until this journal kind of formed. And this journal turned into a book, and that became the saving grace of everything.
I got back into dancing and Native American women warriors. Kind of happened by accident. I mean, I've done some color guarding, but it was usually in a male's color guard. I was just like an extra or something, but this time it was just all of us women, which was unique. I was always one to kind of push the fact that, hey, women are in the military too, women go to combat too, women are fighters too. So I made us some jingle dresses, and I put our combat patches, or our unit patches, or army patches on there. The jingle dress, which is Ojibwe, it's a prayer dress and a dance of healing. And I thought, it's time for me to heal.
There was a piece of me that felt I was unworthy to be a parent because of what had happened. And so to me, one of the biggest obstacles I faced was recognizing what was holding me up and preventing me from becoming a productive husband and a productive father. This isn't just about me anymore. The reality is it's a trickle effect, and it's affecting everybody in my family. I've done a lot as far as my recovery, and I call it my recovery because that to me is what it is. Acupuncture, chiropractics, counseling, massage therapy, you name it. I also went to school and got my psych degree. Now all I do is I do veterans work. I do intensive PTSD retreats for veteran families. I also volunteer as a chaplain for our local fire department. And so about 90% of my time is now allocated towards helping other people. Inevitably, there's always at least one person in this room that thinks they're fighting this PTSD battle on their own. It's not true.
My daughter, who was going to Mount Holyoke, was taking a course on Vietnam. And she called me up and she said, "Mom, can you come up here and talk?" I stood in front of probably 75 young women, and I'd never talked about it before. But my daughter gets up and she said, "I want to introduce you to my mother, Edie Meeks. She was a nurse who served in Vietnam, and I'm so proud of her." Because no one had ever said that. So I got up and I said to the young women, "I don't know anything about the politics, but I'll tell you what it felt like to be a woman over in Vietnam." And at the very end, when people were coming up and saying thank you so much or whatever, the last little gal came up to me and she said, "Oh, Mrs. Meeks, I would have welcomed you home."
This is how I was taught
to become whole again by speaking the truth and speaking what I've held back for so long. And here, 51 years later, I have found humanity within myself again.
Nice.
So much to think about.
No, it's already becoming more and more natural.
The hardest part of being in the hospital was I didn't have anybody to look up to. I didn't know any amputees. I didn't know any wounded warriors, and I damn sure didn't know any women wounded warriors. So I don't think I realized what the possibilities were. I don't think I realized what I could be doing. I needed an outlet, a release, and I fell in love with snowboarding. Being originally from Florida, I wasn't super familiar with mountains, but it was a sport that no one else was going to do for me. And it was something so unfamiliar that it gave me the confidence that I could go out and do anything. It just opened up so many doors for me. Here we go. Now I climb for a cause. I climb the most technical, some of the most volatile, and definitely the tallest peaks in the world, all for charity. It's still my way of serving after service. Yeah, I'm not flying around Afghanistan in the Marine Corps anymore, but that doesn't mean that I can't take care of people in a different way.
Funding for this program was provided by the Wexner Family Charitable Fund, Battelle, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. JP Morgan Chase is proud to support American Veteran.